I'm Evian Gordon. I'm speaking to you from San Francisco, and it's a great pleasure to be here today. And I wanted to start off by doing something I don't usually do, which is to begin with the skepticisms. Part of the privilege of being in the space as part of a kind of international database and applications to mental health is that we see the good, the bad, and the ugly, that there's enormous skepticisms about what is the role of online assessments and training. And I suppose the reality that people ask often is, well, if behavior change was so straightforward, why is it that so few people change? How do we deal with the information dump that we're currently being all inundated by, the endless lists, la-la land lists of things that people are told what to do? The skepticism about brain training, that if you train something, how do you transfer it into your daily life? Is this just not a form of infotainment? And yet on the other hand of the equation, the other side of the equation that we see is that there's a huge interest now in big data to expand and explore what does work. Why does it work? In whom does it work? And so that's really what I'm going to share with you, a few of our experiences and thoughts, but mainly experiences and data. In terms of what we have seen, we have no monopoly of wisdom, nobody does. It's a field that has very struggling with these issues enormously. And there's a huge triumph of marketing over substance in this entire sector of brain. And as an integrative neuroscientist, as a scientist and a medical doctor, my challenge has been to try and find how do we get across that gap. So that's what I'm going to try and share with you, is a few of our insights. I want to, now that I've started with the skepticisms, let me just invite you to share with me a few breaths. To start with, I want to demonstrate before we start just one simple example of how the science matters. This is just simply a 2,500-year-old idea that everybody's doing and everybody does to some degree, breathe slowly, but with the additional caveat of breathing at 6 breaths per minute. So I'd like to invite you to join and breathe with me at the rate of the breathing bar, just for 3 breaths. Breathe in and out at the same rate as that bar. Now, it turns out that when you're breathing at that rate, there is an amazing resonance that occurs between your heart, your lungs, and your brain. That's why it's called resonant frequency breathing. And my PhD was in serum lipids in cardiology before I switched to the brain. And this is a really powerful example that the way this works is it strengthens your underlying blood pressure system. Literally, it's a very fundamental physiological switch that takes you from being in stress, and as you breathe out at this rate, it puts a brake on your fight-flight stress system. Now, all of these tools, we are just aggregators. That's our job, integrative aggregators. And so these are the tool that was developed by some Russian scientists and the ex-president of the American Biofeedback Society at Alliant University, who developed this, helped develop this with us. So I'm just giving an example though. Brain insights matter, and they have a lot to offer and add to the panoply of tools that are already out there, meditation, yoga, slow breathing of every kind, as one example. So let me go through a little bit of our narrative of how we got and what do we do and how did we get to this position of integration and looking at what works and trying to make that more explicit. And really my one takeaway from today, if nothing else, is that where I see the field of influences moving in this space is to how do you switch thinking in the moment, in 1 second. That is where the focus is going, because that's the way the brain works. So all of this is driving towards how do you for real get insight, give people, empower people with insight about how their brains work, and then tools that can help them in the moment, and then of course in the long run by building habits. So the very quick snapshot is that when I set up the standardized and integrative international database, it was to bring together everything about that could be measured in the brain, from genetics to cognition to all sorts of brain imaging, to look at what are the key insights when we assess the brain that could then be modified in the most effective way. And there are now, there's, I suppose, that's probably the driving reason, that standardized and integrative approach, that so many of the large corporates and massive organizations like AARP have used, particularly the assessment that is in 20 minutes, captures the essence of the key 12 brain capacities of emotion, feeling, cognition, and self-control. And then we screen for 7 primary mental health conditions in 20 minutes. And then all of that is underpinned by these deeper insights. And I think that is why the first mover companies were really interested in looking at and coming with us on the journey of how to use these deep insights and then match them most effectively to how you can really, for real, change them in the moment and as habits. So what is stress and resilience? Well, you can't have an integrative brain talk, total brain talk without something about the brain. So in 1 minute, my brain 101 picture is this, that basically this is just such a beautiful blueprint of the cosmos that lives between our ears, the brain. It's astonishing how elegant it all is, that of course, 85 billion neurons, 5,000 neurons connecting approximately to each. That's trillions of connections, overwhelming. But the funny thing is that the essence of this blueprint is surprisingly straightforward in this regard. So the little arrows going both ways, that's in the central relay nucleus of the brain. So all information that comes in and out of your brain is going through that central nucleus. It's remarkably elegant and efficient in the way information processed at the back of the brain, sensory information, and then activated from the front of the brain is it. Like, that's the show. And it happens remarkably automatically and incredibly effectively. So there's an alignment in the sensory input, motor output in our brains. Unbelievably effective. As we all know, we could be walking and the brain's main goal is to keep us safe, safety first, keep us alive. So somebody could throw a missile at you and you'll move out of the way without even knowing how you did it, because that is the efficient, aligned, highly evolved input-output system. Now, between that input and that output are a lot of decisions that are not so automatic. And they happen, strangely enough, of course, in a much more complicated way. And this is where things get a little more tricky, and why it's useful to at least have some idea that, ironically, whilst we all are educated to believe that we are rational beings, the reality is that underlying that rationality is a huge driver of non-conscious emotions, of cues, of intuitions. What does that really mean? It's actually not that complicated. They are cues, either environmental cues or body language cues that we pick up, voice cues, and we instantaneously respond to them in less than 1/5 of a second, 1/5 of 1 second. You are processing input that is driving your feelings consciously at about 1/2 a second. You start feeling the consequences of picking up a threat cue. Then about 1/2 a second later, you will start experiencing your increase in heart rate, your sweating, your breath change, which is known as the fight-flight reflex if it's a really dangerous cue. And then your cognition kicks in, your prefrontal cortex that's evolved, and trebled in size in the last 5 million years through, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and us. This is where, yes, there's then a detailed explication, slower, about what is this input to the brain telling me. So aligning that emotion, intuition, biases, snap judgments. What are these biases? They're shortcuts. They're shortcuts to make sense of our decisions. So we have this amazing scenario where we've got this emotion cue awareness and biases that are for snapshot, quick decision making, driving our brain, and then we've got to make sense of it. but we need to align it. So why this is relevant to stress and resilience is that just the awareness that many of those thoughts that happen to us, that we've a complex combination of genetics and conditioning, but also just the reality of how the snapshotting in the brain works, we should be a little more curious about it and a bit maybe less hijacked. And certainly some of those thoughts are alarming enough where we can become catastrophizing about it, especially in an era like COVID where you put on alert. So every new bit of warning can be quite dislocating. So it's more like the awareness of that can give us a little bit more openness maybe to think about, well, how do we calm this all down and not catastrophize and not overly magnify, put it into a bit of context. And that's, of course, happening in our cognition. So aligning that process is really critical. The problem is, how do you do that really quickly? So we have 50,000 thoughts a day. I mean, we have many, many more if you think about that input output. I mean, that's like all the time, 24/7. But really what I want to share a few thoughts with you about is getting a quick insight into your own brain's core capacities so that you can best use your strengths and weaknesses, your strengths, your emotion strengths, how well you deal with stress, your rational ability to memorize, focus, and plan, and how you can self-control, how you can use those thoughts and train those thoughts more effectively, but really think about it in the moment. Like, instead of me giving you a la-la land list of things and arm waving here about, how meditation is going to change your life, it may, but it's unlikely if you do not rewire specific, granular networks that switch off that fight-flight system in stress. And also deal with resilience. What is resilience? Bounce back ability that give you some self-control to not allow yourself to go into a cycle of decline, but find the strengths and combination of pieces to increase your ability to deal and recover from adversity, and then build it into a habit in the long run. So let's begin with stress. So we know that stress is essentially when those hijack moments are not well reconciled to how you're thinking about them, broken thoughts in your brain's core, your default mode network. They grow, they get consolidated, neural networks that fire together, wire together. So when you have negative thoughts, and they're recursively going around in your brain, and then you have too many demands, and you don't have the capacity, you don't have a framework, a strategy, a very specific way to break that circuit of negativity, of worrying, kind of edgy thoughts that are not that helpful, that is a problem. And the bigger that gap, the harder it is to stop the rumination. So really, that safety first issue, that ability to feel at least some real awareness, log it in, of this fight-flight response, and that there are ways to measure your stress and then induce some very specific brain hacks, some very specific ways to switch off this increased physiological stress response. That's the reality of the challenge. Now, of course, the data on stress, when we look in our database, as I mentioned, it's a huge database and growing rapidly as the growing number of corporates are adding into this data set on scale. We can see that early life stress is a big factor. People who have early life stress events have miles more baseline increase of their stress and anxiety and depression. So it just means that the reason why we screen for mental health, why the assessment is so seminal, is not only do you see your natural strengths and weaknesses, how stressed am I? Am I good at cognition? Have I got emotional awareness of these cues that could be hijacking me? In addition to that, you want to know, have I got a further little challenge to deal with? Like, do I have anxiety? Am I at risk for depression? So that's why the combination of that assessment pieces are so relevant, to sort of use this platform, Total Brain platform, as a mirror, as a window into yourself, and look at it as a total brain body actually, rather than as a silo. And there's a huge winnowing out of silos. There are 10,000 health apps at the moment, and they're clearly the big corporates are moving towards looking for integrative solutions, because the silos are great, many of them, but they can also be hard to fit together and look at your total way in which you can put these pieces together. Same with resilience. When we look at resilience as this relentless ability to adapt effectively, bounce back, this flexibility. So what is the flexibility? It's that same system, that vagus system. So we've got fight, flight, and we've got calm, flexible. The fight, flight, we all know, is very hardwired to keep us alive. But so is this flexible, calm, flexible system called the vagus system. So is it pretty tightly coupled as the brake, so that the two are in balance all the time. So the ability to get into that calm, flexible state is integral to being resilient. And then that's the stress mastery. And then that's coupled with other factors like being relentlessly positive and nudging positivity, learning from adversity. Social connection and support is a huge issue. And the whole power of being able to get these insights of self and of tools that match and work best for you, and regulate, learn self-regulation in different circumstances. How do you deal with it? How do you overcome these challenges in a way that are for real, that transfer into your real life, and you then start training them in your real life as well as just on the app, which is just the sort of simulation for taking it across into your real life. So resilience, we know in the workplace that productivity, for example, is hugely influenced by resilience. This was a paper I published a long time ago in Neuroleadership, but the data is growing and growing that there's a really, resilience is a really good index of adaptive productivity in all sorts of ways. So our wonderful, innovative and visionary CEO, Louis Gagnon, he came up with this idea, a very timely idea, about creating a national mental health index, and he's got on board One Mind at Work, the National Alliance, American Health Policy Institute, the HR Policy Association, and there are dozens of corporates now that every month Louis presents our findings from this assessment, these cognitive capacities, the mental health screen of corporates around the country, and you can see that there is this pattern. This is just at COVID and after COVID, just prior to COVID, February, the first point, and then you can see each month there was this obviously initial rise in stress that then sort of plateaued out, adaptation, and now you can see the trend is slightly up again probably because of the uncertainty, lots of reasons. And of course with resilience as well, it went down a lot initially, we recovered, and now you can see the trend is down because this is the era of reframing. The COVID era, it's a real challenge now to have a really good framework for these two issues. And now there are literally hundreds and hundreds of corporates that are now being exposed to this data, asking these kind of questions about post-COVID reframing. And so that is really the essence of we're now going to start bringing also the data of what I'm really sharing with you, which is okay. So who does get better? What are they doing about it other than the crucial issue of tracking it? And having that awareness is, of course, the first and second step to the third step, which is the sort of the self-monitoring to the self-care. So let's just take a minute, it's in fact 30 seconds, just to absorb a couple of things that are meaningful to you about what I've just said. I hope that wasn't too much of an info dump. My main issue was really just to share with you the crucial nature of the awareness, self-reflection, embedding, getting it clear about where you are and where your users will be with respect to the context about stress. So let's just have a thought of that for a minute. Okay, so how can you support your employees in this endeavor? Well, that self-monitoring of capacities in mental health is crucial. And really to, obviously we have ways, and whether you use this app or others, there's increasing conduits to flag risk and this is not a clinical app. This is purely for self-empowerment. So there is a very straightforward ways for referrals. You know, obviously all of this is confidential for the employees, for referrals to where they can get further help if they need it, but to really also begin to address the self-help empowerment in the moment and building habits. So the self-monitoring is also critical for one other variable, and that is what I hope you take away from today is that 1 second in the moment is critical, because the brain is a dynamical system. It's not operating over, minutes and time to think and have a good chill out about it. It's seriously happening in fractions of a second, and it's hugely dynamical. But it's also dynamical across the day, the week, the month, your life. Everybody has an ongoing dynamical fluctuation of stress, well-being, and resilience. So it's like a normal distribution curve. In the left, stress, where you're a little challenged at this end of the below the 2 standard deviations, minus 2 standard deviations. And at resilience, you're more like you're starting to become like in a peak performance, but plus 2 standard deviations. And then in the middle is the majority of people who are just trying to find the right balance. So that fluctuation is a dynamical process. And I think it's worthy in the brain now that we move away from, same way as there's a culling out of siloed solutions, to a more kind of seriously, how do we address this as a dynamical system? I think similarly with measurement, to think about it as your dynamical way in which your strengths and weaknesses are working for you, and where they fail and where they succeed. So our simple app is, as I mentioned, when the database was set up, it's not our database or my database. It was really the key opinion leaders around the world who helped us select the key elements in that assessment of emotion, including some non-conscious emotion bias issues, but emotion awareness, the feelings, the stress, the anxiety, just the sort of, how at risk are you for feelings. And then, of course, cognition, which is, everybody knows, cognition is memory, focus, and planning, but measuring that with tasks rather than questions. So, for example, the little task on the left of your screen is from the Reuben Gur University of Pennsylvania task on identifying emotion awareness, the emotion cues. And it's a very standardized, highly replicated, many times published task that helps with cue awareness. We've expanded some of the underlying analysis a bit, but same principle. Each component is a well-validated piece from the scientific literature. Now, the self-care, the fun part. What is going on? This gap is between knowing and doing. It's amazing to me in the whole database. I don't know, probably over 300 scientists now that have published in some way out of this database. And when I deal with them and some of the bigger studies and groups, it's staggering that this is the case. People know what they got to do because they're used to all the lists and they should be's, could be's. Why are they not doing it? What are we missing here? Well, that is where the rubber hits the road, because it would appear that all the motivation in the world, all the information in the world, all that is transient. Information doesn't get you to change. Motivation is transient. So it would appear that, just like I said in the skepticism, they are real in this regard, in the same way as if somebody went to a health gym and they just went through the motion of doing exercise, which is what I used to be, one of those people, with no intensity and no form, the chances are it's not going to lead to anything. If you're on diet to lose weight, and you can have the fanciest diet on the planet, if you are not eating 3,500 calories less every week or month, however much you want to lose, you will not lose that pound. It is 3,500 calories, whichever way you cut it up. Now, there are other issues, of course. Stress can cause cortisol, can change insulin. But the fact of the matter is there's some basic rules. Well, the rule in the brain is neurons that fire together, wire together. We're either rewiring our brain or we're talking infotainment. Now, to rewire your brain is granular. It's not a general process. So you need a framework and you need to be ready for it. And you need some intensity. And you certainly need some being in the moment process training. So my experience and my personal view, I have to say, in dealing with a lot of apps and groups around the world, is that that's not often sort of expressed explicitly. This is rewiring your brain is not a cakewalk, but it is fun because the brain likes winning and it can be super engaging if the information is communicated explicitly enough. And that's what we're trying to do. We have a framework, but you need to be clear about your why. And this framework is not our framework. Again, we integrators. We live next to Silicon Valley. Of these hundreds of apps, they're all doing wonderful research into the science of habit. And so the distillation seems to be that be clear about your why, because that increases your commitment. Is what is your pain point that's driving you? Or what is it just the benefit that you want to be a peak performer, really increase your resilience? And then be super explicit about what. That's where the assessment helps point people. And every day, the recommendation engine in Total Brain suggests things for people to train every day so that it's aligned to the what, very explicit, so that you can do the same thing a number of times. We use a 30-day challenge that you can rewire. But it's the how that is the secret sauce. All of that is small time compared to really, for real, adding a little bit of intensity that increases your adrenaline. That adrenaline intensity when you train, that targets the neurons that are going to be rewired when you go to sleep. Usually is most of when the rewiring occurs. And then that's acetylcholine. And then you really creating a process that's aligned with how the brain works biologically. And it requires very granular approach. It's just three key factors that I mentioned. I mean, you can see many others. You can go to BJ Fogg or any of these other sites. You see the beautiful elegance of many ways to nudge and tip. But it would appear to me anyway that the three most important of many is the daily steps, which everyone knows this. Because why? Why daily steps? Because the brain needs to win. And daily steps that are small means you'll get your win, you'll get your dopamine buzz, and already you've got a bit of contagiousness, a bit of momentum. You're not being fearful of failure, so you're already on the right track. And then using anchors. So I know I use brushing my teeth in the morning triggers my anchor that I'm going to do my resonant frequency breathing within 30 minutes of that time. But people use all sorts of anchors over the day that are already automatically there for them. And then reward yourself after every single successful training. Now, it could just be a sort of metaphorical pat on the back. It could be sharing the fact that you trained and were successful and secrete oxytocin by sharing the joy and bonding of success with others. Doesn't matter. People find what works for them. They find the small steps that were within their zone, and they find their anchors and they find their rewards. But that is the beginning of the framework. Let's take a poll of what works for you to switch off your stress in the moment. If you wouldn't mind just answering the top one for you. Do we have a winner, Ryan? Numbers on the screen? No. So I can't see the winning numbers yet, but often, here we go. No? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So slow breath is the most, 44%. Positivity 13%. And the beauty for you to see, meditation, low, 7%. But music, beautiful. And by the way, the music that I'm playing for you today in those little scenes, I've got 2 more to show you. Those little things are from our NeuroTunes part of the platform. If you do go to the library in Total Brain, and the music is driving the brain to relax in a specific way, and exercise always high. So you can see a range of personal preferences, and that's the criticality of having everything in one place, whereby people can look, explore, test for themselves, and then track and see the way that it's working for them. So all of these pieces we have, other than exercise, we have exercise and food, which we actually are doing at the moment with the American Heart Association. So other than that, for now, all of those pieces are there and can be deployed within the app. Thank you. Right. So to finish off on specifics about this training in the moment, so for stress, that resonant frequency breathing or meditation or the music I was telling you about in NeuroTunes, these are the 3 most commonly used effective tools. But the resonant breathing, because it switches off in the moment. The gratitude, because as you know from positive psychology, we know that a gratitude journal is one of the best things you could do for the longer run, in the long run, to get people really rewiring their stress mastery network. And NeuroTunes is a supplement to resonant breathing. About 50% of people on the app, I think about 1 million people that have used Total Brain, but about 50%, it's quite a recent advent, but about 50% of the new users use some form of NeuroTunes. They listen to nature sounds, or they listen to the music, but it's not traditional music. It's been built in conjunction with us by Brain Music Labs to train the brain at sort of subtle frequencies that get the brain and the heart and the lungs to relax and go into the most sort of calm, flexible state. So nothing that we do is without a specific brain-based purpose. We take conventional pieces and add the kind of brain insight piece, as I showed you with the resonant frequency breathing. And the data is pretty self-evident in that after training, we have found that at about 2 hours of training, so we recommend a 30-day challenge. So that's 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week over the sort of 4-week period, 30 days. And that's 2 hours. And we found from a number of times now, but I think the first analysis we did was with 80,000 people. You can see that when people at about 2 hours, they start reducing their stress levels pretty significantly. And that 2-hour threshold is very important because it means people have got a kind of an effort to benefit ratio that they can think of. However, many people report that even within 3 breaths, which is why I asked you to share 3 breaths with me at the beginning, within 3 breaths, they feel that difference. They can feel, they don't know why, they just feel it straight away. And of course, breathing slowly 3 times is also good, but we've got heart rate variability and brain function data that shows that that is the most effective way to really switch off the stress. So you can start quantifying that, and I'll show you a way where your users will be able to do it shortly, soon within the app as well, to get those sort of biometric measurements so people can see. But anyway, 2 hours is the threshold. And that is critical, that the communication expectation is yes in the moment, because if you don't show people a benefit very, very quickly, they're not going to be there for long. And so this is the trade-off of in one app starting to communicate in multiple ways, that if you do deploy these kinds of approaches, that your communication is really clear about and not going through the motions and having some sort of structure in all of this. Okay, let's have another, just a 30-second thought. So for those of you who noticed, this was Neurotunes, a second example. This is more like a kind of a more ambient music, whereas the first one was nature sounds. And within that ambient music, there's a subtle entrainment dynamic of slowly switching your brain down to a more and more relaxed state. Anyway, the point about that is good stress and bad stress. I really want to emphasize that one of the biggest takeaways for me in the stress field is that stress can be helpful. I mean, stress is telling you something. Stress is telling you that there's a mismatch between that emotion, intuitive intuition that you picked up and your thinking. Something is not aligning. And so simply at least being open to being inquisitive about that, rather than just being sort of in that hyper stress state and you're just super reactive. Everything in the brain is about thresholds. So the goal in training is to get below the threshold of reactivity so that you've got a chance to just take the slightly bigger mindset, this total brain mindset, and think about your brain, the 85 billion neurons, how your emotions are driving, hijacking, fears, magnifying them. Put those into better context, and there are tools to do that I'll show you in a moment, and then have a chance at least to bring in and deploy, whether it's the breath or the music or whatever works for you, in a way that's really allowing you in the moment and then in the long run as a habit to switch that off. Okay, so with resilience, just to rapidly finish off here now, that you can see that each topic that I mentioned in resilience, the learning from adversity, positive emotion, social connection, each issue is got its own app that can be helped to train that particular factor in resilience, which is more complicated than stress. So stress mastery is the doorway to enhanced resilience. And then with resilience, you need that broader whole brain kind of training and adaptation and flexibility. So for example, I'll only give you one. I mean, I'll just say again that the wonderful legacy that the field of positive psychology left for all of us is boosting positivity, nudging positivity, starting with your strengths, is not just focusing on your weaknesses. But the field of cognitive behavior therapy, Thought Tamer is our version of that, is equally important from cognitive science, that you can challenge your black and white thinking, your catastrophizing. So here is the key kind of thinking traps of catastrophizing, black and white thinking, should have, could have, regrets, jumping to conclusions, overgeneralizing. All these sort of higher order and automatic thoughts are super unhelpful. And so having a tool like Thought Tamer, just mini CBT Lite, to just explore these and think about reframing in the same way as we're all thinking about reframing post-COVID generally, reframing our in the moment. How do we deal with negative thoughts, mismatches? How do we not catastrophize them? How do we stop the simplistic thinking and look at more of the gray realities of what fits best for us? What is the balancing act of how we can sort of most effectively adapt in the moment and in the long run? And then just to end off with the reality of building a habit it's rewiring. So the first time you train is the most important. It's the game changer. You're ready. You've gone through the Procratia readiness to change issues. You're ready. You're owning it. You're doing it. Then the first 7 is that you're going to learn the most about. And the 20th time we've shown and published the fact that you've now got a network in there. You've done it. And so therefore it's really important to help people in the last stretch goal from 20 to 30 training days, that now they're consolidating it, and you've got to really convert them at the 30-day point to bring this into their daily life. So after about 1,000 times, which by the way can be even visualizing it is a time. So within a month or two, it becomes so deeply automatic. If people are following that simple framework, they are rewarding themselves on these milestone days, and that's all part of the gig. So I don't want to leave time for questions. So I do just want to say that, however, in the 30-day challenge, we give people tips every day a fun fact, a little article, because you really want to help people along the journey. And we all know that between 20 and 30, that's the stretch zone, that most people stick it out once they've reached there. But between the 7th day and the 20 day, that's fallout day. That's when people get inertia. They go, can I see enough benefit? That's hazardous. So the communication in a cadence of taking people along, the way that neural networks are wired, it starts off great, and then you want to really consolidate till it becomes automatic. So the corporate use cases, the corporates are also super interested in this notion now of also getting in the moment. So we'll be releasing a mobile phone way to use the camera to measure your heart rate variability, so users can see for themselves in the moment. That'll be released, I believe, by the end of this quarter. And that'll be available to users to also just see for themselves in the moment how they are, and also how well their habits are working for their early morning measure. Is it rising? Am I in a better state generally? And most corporates are really focused on looking at their proof points, of course. So they want to see the difference between their first assessment and their second assessment. And that usually should be after about 30 days. Sometimes people assess too early. They've got to just see the biology of this. But some people train a lot, so they can do a little earlier, but we suggest 30 days. And the corporates are looking to see, okay, well, who trained, who didn't, what did they train, what did they not train, how do we better communicate to keep this sort of framework and this journey on track, and then use this as an objective measure. But I will also say that growingly, people are seeing that every day is an assessment. You can see from whether people are training, what did they train, how long did they train, are their scores getting better? Are they more present? So there's lots of little micro measures that almost every time you go and train your brain, it is an assessment. That's it. I will invite questions after this next little comment to just end off on this. I've deliberately, we are not trying to be simplistic, but we are trying to be simple. We are integrating the essence of what is working about stress, how to measure it most effectively, and resilience, we measure that too, and then how to really be thoughtful about bringing those pieces together in a way that can help every user be self-empowered and more adaptive to their own needs. And I will end off on one final little video and then invite questions. That's all I got. I look about questions. I hope some of you are interested in exploring the platform, and would always value your feedback. You're such a sophisticated group. I'd love any feedback our team can get. We have, and then we have a Total Brain podcast where we have key opinion leaders giving the essence in 30 minutes of some of these topics, and any topics you have that you feel could be helpful. We'd be happy to find the right key opinion leaders to share it with you. They've really shown up. They've been magnanimous. That's all I got, and I'd like to invite questions.
All right. Thank you, Evian, for the wonderful presentation. I'll read a few of the questions we got out of the Q&A. So first, it's not really a question, but it's more of like a topic that might be worth discussing a little bit more. Someone remarked that they found it was interesting to hear that resilience can be learned.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
So, yeah, I mean, look, it's a really crucial point. I mean, resilience can be learned because flexibility can be taught. We are, when we have a sense that we get wired, and this, one of the biggest reasons that change is so difficult is it's a threat. Let me say that again. Change is a threat. What's it a threat to? Seriously? When I was a practicing doctor and I used to tell people to lose weight and lower their cholesterol, I'd go, what am I missing? Why are they not jumping at this opportunity? It's because it's hard to change your status quo where you feel safe. You've got your adaptive compromises. So So therefore, it's hard to be open to change. But when you get trust that by rewiring your brain in this way that I've tried my best to share with you, that your rewiring is change. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's resilience, whether it's stress, whether it's a peak performer with deliberate practice, just tweaking up a bit, or whether it's depression. I don't want to overstate that, but all I'm saying is that everything can be rewired because it's the same principles, whatever it is. The challenge is just to not underestimate that rewiring takes a little bit of like seriousness and a little bit of time. But our goal, all of us, is to also make that sort of fun and celebratory. But yes, no different in the principles to resilience, more complicated than stress, but with a lens of how do I deal with adversity? Do I just give up? Or am I determined, never say die? Do I know when to pivot? All of these issues are highly doable, and between the Angela Duckworth kind of grit, kind of really peak performance kind of resilience, or just the more traditional kind of overcoming adversity with this combination of pieces that we've discussed, doable. I wouldn't want to say it's easy, but it's done on scale now by more and more people as they get coaches and get platforms that take them through this in a systematic way.
Fantastic. It's definitely a good way to look at it and, change the outlook on it. Our next question is from Anne. In the 2 hours of training for the breathing, how often do we do it?
Yeah, so 2 hours of training is what's recommended by the American Biofeedback Society and what we found is that 10 minutes is like really, you're going to see really serious changes. About a third of people do it in the morning, about 10 minutes. A third of people do it before they go to sleep because it helps their sleep as well. And about a third do it during the day. They'll find times to, even if it's for 3 minutes. So most commonly, people during the day train for 3 minutes. They say during their lunchtime or whatever, when they're having a downtime, 3 minutes. But some people also, when you've got that rewiring, they'll even do 3 breaths many, many times a day, but at that pace, what they've learned. So in answer to your question, Anne, it's 10 minutes a day, just 3 times a week over 4 weeks. That's going to be your 2 hours. So it's not a lot. What we find, Anne, is that as soon as people do resonant frequency breathing, they will usually, if they see the benefits straight away, which most do, they'll start training for far longer than that in combination over a week. They'll do it much quicker because when something's beneficial, you do not have to persuade people, they'll do it. However, and the same thing applies to any training, that 2 hours. So if you train memory for 2 hours, you'll see the same difference. And our memory trainings or focus or anything that is trained over 2 hours, you will see that cumulative benefit. And it's really not a lot of time, 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week.
Thank you. That definitely does make it seem like a less daunting task, dividing it out like that. Our next question is, the relaxing music is wonderful. Like, what are they, or where do you get them?
Yeah, so it's developed by a company called Brain Music Labs. We have we help worked with Brain Music Labs to give them the science principles. John Vitale is the main guy, and he built them for us. It's exclusive to us, our NeuroTunes, and they are very much driven by the deep science of tempo and frequency and even binaural beats. People can choose to switch those on, so you bring your 2 hemispheres together, but mainly just the tempo, and that there's science that shows that you can, at the right tempo of music, you slowly bring the tempo down. It's kind of almost imperceptible, but you then, when you measure your heart rate variability, you see yourself, feel yourself, but then objectively can see that you increase that calm and flexibility. So this is not music, it's NeuroTunes, and the music is called entrainment. It's neurotraining, neuroentrainment. It's a kind of resonant music is what it is. So resonance is that beautiful point in the brain and body where things get aligned and you're driving at a specific frequency. So it's resonant music, and that's who builds it, a very wonderful man and a company that we've been working with for many, many years.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's currently what we have in there for the questions. So
great. Well, I thank you all very much, and it's been a great pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much, Maria, and for the invitation. And I look forward to any way that we can follow up and deepen the experience of your total brain.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. And for those that are still on, there's a lot of excellent information on totalbrain.com. And also, Dr. Gordon has a podcast. Dr. Gordon, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the podcast is key opinion leaders like the ex-director of the American Institute of Stress, Charles Darwin's great-great-grandson, Chris Darwin. He does many of them with me and key opinion leaders like David Whitehouse, a Harvard psychiatrist, a trained psychiatrist who worked at United, so he's a big innovator, head of innovation there. These are all a mixture of people who come and share their thoughts about topics like stress, resilience, mental health, peak performance, and we deliberately keep it to try as close as possible to a 30-minute essence, which is kind of what Total Brain is. It's an integration in one platform. We try and do that in the podcast too, to give an essence about each topic, and then we have little ebooks that as well that can be got from Matt Restagini, where little summaries of each certain topics like mental health or focus and memory, and then the podcasts are embedded in the ebook. So it's just an ongoing podcast, and they're usually about 2 a month. There are about 30 of them so far. They're about 2 a month that we select the key opinion leaders to come in and I interview them and talk to them. And they often address their comments as to how people can also use Total Brain, but it's not just about Total Brain, it's about the topic.
Okay. Great, thank you for that information. Excellent, so I think we're finished for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. And again, we will be sending you a follow-up email with a copy of the presentation and the video.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.